Matt Damon thought he knew everything about his perfectly organized life in Beverly Hills, until the day he walked through his front door and found his housekeeper, Maria, collapsed on the marble floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. In that moment, the Academy Award winner realized that behind the polished surfaces of his mansion, a devastating secret had been hiding in plain sight, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, compassion, and what it truly means to use your influence for good. To continue listening to this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. The California sun dipped behind the Hollywood Hills as Matt Damon's Tesla pulled into his Beverly Hills driveway. Another exhausting day of interviews had drained him, but home always provided sanctuary. The Spanish colonial mansion, with its terracotta tiles and manicured gardens, represented peace from celebrity chaos. For 4 years, Maria Gonzalez had maintained this haven. The soft-spoken woman in her 40s moved through the house like a gentle breeze, ensuring perfection without intrusion. She never asked for autographs, never brought friends to gawk, and treated him with respectful kindness that made her invaluable. What struck Matt most was Maria's genuine warmth. Despite their vastly different circumstances, she wasn't intimidated or starstruck. She left thoughtful touches, fresh garden flowers in his study, his favorite coffee stocked without asking, warm meals waiting after long days. Sometimes Matt caught glimpses of her life beyond his walls. She'd mention her son Diego with such pride and love that it reminded him of his own mother's devotion. She spoke of the boy's intelligence, curiosity, and dreams of becoming a scientist. These brief conversations humanized their professional relationship. As Matt approached the front door that evening, something felt different. The house seemed heavier, as if holding its breath. He attributed it to exhaustion and pushed through the wooden door. The marble entryway usually echoed with subtle sounds, air conditioning, the grandfather clock's tick. Tonight, however, there was something else. A sound so soft he almost missed it, but once heard it filled the entire space. Someone was crying. Matt set down his briefcase and listened. The sound came from the living room, muffled, desperate weeping from someone trying not to be heard, breaking apart while struggling to hold together. His instinct was to call out, but something stopped him. The vulnerability in those quiet sobs suggested privacy, a moment never meant to be witnessed. Matt found himself frozen between helping and respecting boundaries. Compassion won. Moving quietly across the marble, he approached the living room. The sound grew clearer, definitely Maria's voice, broken by tears. As he rounded the corner, the sight stopped him cold. Maria knelt on the Persian rug, her slight frame hunched as if trying to disappear. Her neat ponytail had come undone, dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. She clutched a crumpled paper, whole body shaking with silent grief. Matt had witnessed many emotional scenes in his acting career, worked with directors who could draw tears from stone, but nothing prepared him for this raw, unfiltered anguish. This wasn't performance. This was pure human suffering, stripped of pretense, the kind of pain that comes from watching your world collapse piece by piece. "Maria?" he said softly. Her head snapped up, revealing swollen red eyes streaked with continuing tears. Mortification crossed her features, almost as painful to witness as her grief. "Mr. Damon," she gasped, scrambling to stand. "I'm so sorry. I didn't hear you come in. I was... She frantically smoothed her hair and wiped her face, but tears kept betraying her composure attempts. "Please, don't apologize," Matt said, stepping closer while maintaining respectful distance. "Are you hurt? Can I help?" Maria shook her head vigorously, clutching that mysterious paper tighter. No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I should go. This is very unprofessional." But everything about her screamed that nothing was fine. Trembling hands, shallow breathing, complete inability to function normally despite her words. She stood frozen between fleeing and drowning in whatever had reduced this strong woman to this state. "Maria, please sit down." He gestured to the nearby sofa. "You're shaking. Whatever happened, we can figure it out." "You don't understand," she whispered, voice breaking. This isn't your problem. This is my responsibility. I shouldn't bring my troubles into your beautiful home." The way she said "your beautiful home" struck Matt oddly. No resentment, but clear acknowledgement of the vast difference between their worlds. Here he sat, surrounded by unimaginable luxury, while his employee faced something devastating enough to bring her to her knees. "Look," Matt moved to the sofa, sitting calmly, hoping his demeanor might encourage her to follow. "I know we don't usually discuss personal things, and I respect that, but you're clearly going through something serious, and you're here, in my home, which makes me care. You don't have to tell me anything, but please, sit down and let me get you water." Maria looked surprised, as if her employer caring about her personal welfare was foreign. She seemed to weigh options: flee and handle this crisis alone, or accept unexpected support from someone in a completely different world. The decision was made when her legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa's edge, still clutching that paper, crying quietly but no longer hiding it. Matt waited patiently, sensing that pushing would cause retreat. He got water and tissues from the kitchen, setting both within reach before settling back, maintaining comfortable silence that sometimes proved more valuable than words. After several minutes, Maria's breathing steadied, though tears continued. She reached for tissues with a mumbled "thank you" and tried cleaning her face. Finally, she looked up, with eyes holding years of accumulated worry and fear. "It's my son," she whispered, and those 3 words seemed to cause physical pain. "My Diego, he's very sick." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Matt felt something tighten in his chest, the universal fear every parent recognizes. He'd seen that look before, in his own mother's eyes during his father's illness, in friends facing medical crises with their children, the look of someone watching their world balance on a cliff's edge. "How sick?" he asked gently. Maria's hands shook as she unfolded the crumpled paper. Medical letterhead covered with intimidating terminology made bad news look even worse. "The doctors say he has something called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a disease that—" She paused, struggling with English words and devastating reality. Matt leaned forward encouragingly, though part of him dreaded what he'd hear. "It makes his muscles get weak. Very weak," Maria continued, barely above a whisper. "He's only 9 years old, Mr. Damon. 9, and they tell me this disease will take away his ability to walk, to move, to breathe on his own." The last words emerged as a broken sob. Heavy silence carried a mother's worst nightmare. Matt found himself thinking about his own daughters, imagining receiving such news, and his stomach turned. But for Maria, this wasn't imagination. This was daily reality. "When did you find out?" he asked, voice softer than he'd ever heard it. 6 months ago, Maria replied, wiping her eyes. "At first, I thought he was being lazy. He'd complain about being tired, about leg pain after playing soccer. I thought maybe he was growing too fast, needed more vitamins." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I kept telling him to eat more vegetables, exercise more. I thought I was being a good mother, pushing him to be stronger." Matt's heart broke with each word. The guilt in Maria's voice was palpable. Self-recrimination from not knowing her attempts to help were actually impossible requests. The diagnosis must have been devastating. "Devastating," Maria repeated, testing the word. "Yes, but that was only the beginning. This disease moves fast in some children. Diego's case is aggressive. Without treatment, very expensive treatment." She couldn't finish, but didn't need to. Matt began understanding why Maria had been crying on his living room floor. This wasn't just about diagnosis, this was about racing against time with weapons far beyond her reach. What kind of treatment does he need? Maria looked at the paper again, not just a diagnosis, but an estimate from a specialist or treatment center. There are new therapies, gene therapy, experimental treatments that could slow the disease, maybe stop it, but they're not available in regular hospitals, only at special centers, private centers, and the cost. She trailed off, shaking her head. "How much?" Matt pressed gently. "The initial treatment is $250,000, Maria said, voice flat with resignation that comes from knowing something is impossibly out of reach. just for the first year. After that, ongoing treatments, physical therapy, specialized equipment. Doctors estimate over $500,000 total. Matt felt punched in the stomach. $500,000, perhaps a month of his typical salary, but to Maria it might as well have been $500 million, an impossible sum standing between her son and his future. Insurance won't cover it? Maria shook her head. They say it's experimental, not proven enough, and Diego isn't a citizen, so he doesn't qualify for many programs. We've been in this country 8 years, Mr. Damon. 8 years working, paying taxes, being good people. But when your child is dying, she broke off. The injustice hit Matt like a wave. Here was a woman who dedicated years caring for his home, showing nothing but loyalty and integrity, watching her child face devastating disease while bureaucracy and economics blocked treatment. The contrast between his privileged position and her desperate circumstances was stark and uncomfortable. Maria, why didn't you tell me before? 6 months is a long time to carry this alone. She looked surprised, as if the question was incomprehensible. Mr. Damon, you're a good employer, but this isn't your responsibility. Diego is my son, my responsibility. I couldn't ask you for such a thing. It wouldn't be right. Such dignity in her words, pride mixed with desperation, left Matt simultaneously humbled and frustrated. Here was a woman whose child faced life-threatening conditions, who had access to someone with means to help, but whose propriety and independence prevented even considering asking for assistance. So, what's changed? Why are you here now? Maria's slowly returning composure crumbled again. Today I got the final notice. The treatment center gave us 6 months to raise money for Diego's acceptance. Today's the deadline. Tomorrow they'll give his spot to another child. She looked up with eyes holding all a mother's anguish, watching last hope slip away. I failed him, Mr. Damon. I failed my son. Matt stared at Maria, mind racing as her situation's full scope became clear. Tomorrow? The deadline was tomorrow, and she sat in his living room, surrounded by luxury that could easily cover her son's treatment several times over, believing she'd failed as a mother because she couldn't produce an impossible sum. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Matt found himself caught in a moment that would define something fundamental about who he was. All his life, he'd prided himself on staying grounded, despite success, remembering where he came from, not losing touch with regular people's struggles. But now, faced with those struggles' stark reality in his own home, he realized how theoretical his understanding had been. Maria, he said finally, voice hoarse with emotion, what if there was a way to get Diego into that program? She looked confused, as if the question didn't make sense. But there is no way. I've tried everything. I sold my car, borrowed money from my sister, even asked the bank for a loan using my house as collateral, but they said I don't make enough money to qualify. Matt's stomach twisted at the thought of Maria risking her home, probably her only security, in desperate attempts to save her son. How many nights had she lain awake, calculating impossible mathematics, trying to find solutions that didn't exist within her means? That's not what I meant. What if someone could help with the money? Maria's eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. Oh no, Mr. Damon. No. I could never ask you for such a thing. This isn't why I told you. When I got the final notice today, I couldn't keep it inside anymore, but I could never ask you for money. That wouldn't be right. Her immediate rejection struck Matt as both admirable and frustrating. Here was a woman watching her child face devastating disease, and even when presented with potential solution, her first instinct was refusal, out of pride and propriety. A level of integrity he found both humbling and heartbreaking. But what if I wanted to help? What if this isn't about you asking, but about me choosing to do something? Maria stood abruptly, the crumpled paper falling to the floor. No, you don't understand. I work for you. You pay me to clean your house, care for your home. If I take money from you for personal problems, then what am I? What does that make our relationship? Matt could see the internal battle across her face. On one side was desperate love for her son and knowledge that help was offered. On the other was her dignity, belief that accepting help would somehow compromise her integrity or reduce her to something she didn't want to be. "It makes you human," Matt said simply. "It makes you a mother who loves her son and wants to save his life. And it makes me someone who's been given incredible opportunities and resources, and who gets to choose how to use them." But Maria was already backing toward the door. "I'm sorry, Mr. Damon. So sorry for bringing this into your home, for crying in your living room, for making this your problem. I should go." "Maria, wait." Matt stood, mind reeling. He was watching a woman walk away from help that could save her child's life, unable to bridge the gap between her pride and need, between his desire to help and her determination to maintain independence. She paused at the doorway, back to him, shoulders rigid with effort to hold herself together. "Can I ask you something? If the situation were reversed, if I had a sick child and you had the means to help, what would you do?" Maria turned slowly, tears streaming again. "That's different," she whispered. "How is it different? Because you are..." She struggled for words. "You are Matt Damon. You're successful, important, you deserve good things. Me, I'm just someone who cleans houses." The words hit Matt like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or pride, it was about how Maria saw herself in the world, about a hierarchy she believed in so deeply that she couldn't imagine deserving the same consideration she'd readily give others. "Maria, you are not just anything. You're a mother fighting for her child's life. Someone who's worked with integrity and dignity for years. Someone who deserves every bit as much consideration as anyone else, regardless of what job you do or how much money you have." She stared at him, and for a moment he thought he saw something shift. A crack in the wall of unworthiness she'd built around herself. "Your son deserves a chance at life. And if I have the ability to give him that chance, then refusing to help isn't noble, it's wasteful. It's letting pride get in the way of love." Maria's composure finally broke completely. She sank against the doorframe, sobbing with desperate relief that comes from finally letting go of a burden too heavy to carry alone. "I don't know how I would ever repay you," she whispered between sobs. "You don't have to repay me. You just have to let me help." The next morning arrived with clarity that comes after sleepless nights of decision-making. Matt had spent hours on calls with his financial advisor, lawyer, and publicist, setting wheels in motion to give Diego the chance he deserved. But good intentions and deep pockets, while powerful, weren't always enough to navigate complex medical bureaucracy. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, director of the Specialized Treatment Center, was professional but cautious when Matt called personally. "Mr. Damon, I appreciate your interest in helping this family, but I must be honest about what we're dealing with. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is devastating, and while our treatment protocol shows promise, it's not a cure. It's a chance, a good chance, but no guarantees." Matt sat in his home office, looking at perfectly manicured grounds that suddenly seemed less important. "Dr. Chen, I understand there are no guarantees, but without treatment, what happens to Diego?" The pause told him everything before she spoke. Without intervention, children with aggressive DMD typically lose walking ability by age 12. Respiratory complications usually become severe by late teens. "Mr. Damon, I don't want to give false hope, but our gene therapy protocol has shown significant success in slowing progression and, in some cases, actually improving muscle function. Then we need to get Diego into your program, immediately. It's not that simple. Beyond the financial aspect, which you've generously offered to cover, there's a waiting list, insurance protocols to navigate, and comprehensive medical evaluations before we can accept any patient." Matt felt frustration building. "Dr. Chen, with respect, this child was supposed to start treatment today. His mother was told 6 months ago she had until today to secure funding. Are you saying that even with money available, he still can't begin treatment?" "What I'm saying is we need to move carefully. This isn't just about payment. It's about ensuring Diego is the right candidate for this therapy, and that his family understands both potential benefits and risks." The conversation continued 20 minutes, with Dr. Chen explaining various steps needed to get Diego evaluated and hopefully accepted. By the time Matt hung up, he had a clearer, more complicated picture than simply writing a check. His next call was to Maria, who answered on the first ring with a voice suggesting she hadn't slept either. "Mr. Damon, is everything okay?" "Maria, I've been talking to the treatment center. Diego can't start today, but that's not because of money. There are medical evaluations that need to be done first, procedures to follow. But the important thing is that his spot in the program is secure." Silence stretched so long, Matt worried they'd been disconnected. Finally, he heard Maria's voice, thick with tears, but steadier than the night before. "You really did it. You really called them." "Of course I did. But Maria, this is just the beginning. The next few weeks will be intensive. Appointments, tests, consultations. Diego will need you to be strong for him, and you'll need support. I want you to take leave of absence from work with full pay so you can focus on getting him the care he needs." "Mr. Damon, I can't let you do all this. It's too much." Matt had anticipated this response, spending part of the night thinking about addressing Maria's reluctance. "Maria, can I tell you something? Yesterday, when I found you on my living room floor, something changed for me. I realized I've been living in a bubble, surrounded by luxury and comfort, while someone I see almost daily was carrying this enormous burden alone. That's not the kind of person I want to be, and it's not the kind of world I want to live in." He paused, looking around his office with expensive artwork and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have influence, connections, resources most people can only dream of. If I can't use those things to help a 9-year-old boy fight for his life, then what's the point of having them? But people will say things. They'll say you're doing this for publicity, for your image." Matt had considered this possibility, and it bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "Maria, there will always be people who question motives, who assume the worst. But you know why I'm doing this, and I know why I'm doing this, and most importantly, Diego will get the treatment he needs. That's what matters." What Matt didn't tell Maria was that he'd already decided to go public with Diego's story, not for publicity, but because he'd realized something during his sleepless night. If Maria, someone who worked in his own home, had been carrying this burden in silence for 6 months, how many other families were facing similar situations? 3 weeks into Diego's treatment protocol, Matt discovered that good deeds, no matter how privately intended, have a way of becoming public knowledge. It started with a single photograph, a paparazzi shot of him leaving the medical center with Maria and Diego. The image showed Matt kneeling to Diego's level, apparently in animated conversation, while Maria looked on with mixed gratitude and uncertainty. The caption read, "Matt Damon spotted at exclusive medical facility with mystery woman and child. New family?" Within hours, speculation exploded across social media. Theories ranged from absurd suggestions that Matt was secretly married with a hidden family to invasive attempts at identifying Maria and Diego through facial recognition. The attention was exactly what Matt had hoped to avoid. But he quickly realized that in the smartphone and social media age, true privacy was increasingly rare. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, entertainment journalists, and legitimate news outlets who'd pieced together enough information to understand this wasn't typical celebrity scandal. Jennifer Walsh was fielding dozens of interview requests, all wanting to capitalize on what media called Matt Damon's mystery family. "We need to get ahead of this," Jennifer told him during an emergency meeting. "The longer we let speculation run wild, the more invasive it'll get. These people will dig until they find out who Maria and Diego are, where they live, what Diego's medical condition is. If you want to protect their privacy, we need to control the narrative." Matt looked around his living room, the same space where he'd found Maria crying 3 weeks earlier. Everything had changed, not just for Diego and Maria, but for him. He was learning that true generosity came with unexpected responsibilities and complications beyond the initial act of giving. "What do you suggest?" "We do an interview, something controlled, with a reputable journalist. You tell Diego's story, with Maria's permission, and explain what you're doing and why. You take control of the message before someone else does. The idea of turning Diego's medical journey into a media story made Matt uncomfortable, but he was beginning to understand that his discomfort might be less important than potential good that could come from sharing the story. That evening, he sat with Maria in his kitchen to discuss Jennifer's proposal. Diego was upstairs with a tutor Matt had hired to help him keep up with studies while managing his treatment schedule. The boy had adapted to new circumstances with children's resilience, but Matt could see the physical toll treatments were taking. "Maria, I need to ask something important, and I want you to feel completely free to say no. The media has started asking questions about Diego and why I'm involved in his medical care. My publicist thinks we should do an interview, tell our story on our terms before someone else tells it for us. But that would mean making Diego's situation public, and I won't do that without your permission." Maria was quiet for a long time, absently stirring the tea Matt had made. Finally, she looked up with eyes that had grown stronger over recent weeks, as if watching her son receive treatment had given her new courage. "Will it help other children? If people know about Diego, about what you're doing, will it help other families in the same situation we were in?" The question surprised Matt with its selflessness, though perhaps it shouldn't have. This was the same woman who'd suffered in silence rather than ask for help, who'd been more concerned about dignity than saving her son's life. Of course, her first thought would be how their story might benefit others. "I think it could. There are probably thousands of families dealing with rare diseases, fighting insurance companies, trying to navigate medical systems they don't understand. If we can raise awareness, maybe save other children." Maria nodded slowly. "Then we should do it. If Diego's story can help even one other child, then it's worth it." The interview was scheduled with Anderson Cooper for 60 minutes, a decision that reflected Matt's desire for serious journalism rather than entertainment fluff. The morning of the taping, Matt found himself more nervous than he'd been for any movie premiere or award show. This wasn't about his performance. This was about a 9-year-old boy's life and the ripple effects that might follow. Maria had spent the previous evening coaching Diego on what to expect. The boy, with his dark eyes and gentle smile, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, despite his age. "Mom says that by telling our story, we might help other kids who are sick," he told Matt as they prepared for the cameras. "That makes me feel good, like I'm doing something important." The interview began with basic questions about Matt's career and recent projects, but Anderson quickly steered the conversation toward the real reason they were there. "You've been very private about your personal life throughout your career. What made you decide to go public with Diego's story?" Matt looked over at Diego, who sat between his mother and Matt on the studio couch, small but remarkably composed. Sometimes you encounter a situation that puts everything else in perspective. "When I found Maria in my living room, crying because she thought she was going to lose her son to a disease that could be treated, I realized that all the success and resources in the world mean nothing if you can't use them to help someone when they need it most." Anderson turned to Maria. "You worked for Mr. Damon for 4 years, but you never told him about Diego's diagnosis. Why?" Maria's voice was steady but emotional. "In my culture, in my family, we don't ask for help with personal problems. I was his employee, not his friend. It would not have been appropriate. But also," she paused, glancing at Matt, "I didn't think I deserved that kind of help. I thought that was for other people, important people. And now? Now I understand that every child deserves a chance at life, regardless of who their parents are or how much money they have. Mr. Damon didn't help us because he felt sorry for us. He helped us because it was the right thing to do." Anderson shifted his attention to Diego. "How are you feeling about the treatment?" Diego straightened up, his voice clear and confident. "Sometimes I'm tired, and sometimes the medicine makes me feel sick, but I'm getting stronger. The doctors say my muscles aren't getting weaker anymore, and some of them are actually getting better. I want to be a scientist when I grow up, so I can help find cures for other kids who are sick." The interview continued for another hour, covering the challenges of navigating experimental treatments, the financial barriers that prevent families from accessing care, and Matt's plans for establishing a foundation to help other children facing similar situations. But it was Diego's final comment that would become the most quoted moment of the broadcast. When Anderson asked him what he wanted people to know about his experience, the 9-year-old looked directly into the camera and said, "My mom taught me that good things happen when good people decide to help each other. Mr. Damon is good people, and now I get to be okay. I think there are lots of good people watching right now who can help other kids be okay too." The 60 Minutes interview aired on a Sunday night, and by Monday morning, Matt's life had changed completely. His phone was ringing non-stop with calls from other parents facing similar situations, medical professionals offering support, and philanthropists wanting to contribute to what was being called the Diego Foundation. But it wasn't just praise and support. Critics emerged questioning his motives, suggesting this was an elaborate publicity stunt or that he was exploiting a child's illness for personal gain. The comment sections of articles about the story were filled with cynical takes and conspiracy theories that made Matt question whether going public had been the right decision. "You can't let the noise distract from what you're actually accomplishing," Jennifer told him during their weekly meeting. "Look at these numbers. We've received over $50,000 in donations in just 1 week, and that's without any formal fundraising structure. There are parents from across the country reaching out for help with their children's rare diseases. You've started something important." The something important was becoming more complex than Matt had anticipated. Working with medical ethicists, patient advocacy groups, and healthcare policy experts, he was learning about the systemic issues that went far beyond individual cases like Diego's. The American healthcare system, particularly for rare diseases, was a maze of insurance limitations, regulatory barriers, and financial obstacles that trapped families regardless of their determination to save their children. Dr. Sarah Williams, a pediatric geneticist who had reached out after seeing the interview, explained the scope of the problem during a meeting at Matt's house. There are over 7,000 known rare diseases affecting roughly 30 million Americans, most of them children. The average time to get a correct diagnosis is 7 years. The average cost of treatment, when it's available, is over $300,000 annually. Most families face medical bankruptcy within 2 years of diagnosis. The statistics were staggering, but it was the personal stories that truly affected Matt. Letters and emails poured in from families across the country, parents describing their own desperate situations, their children's struggles, their battles with insurance companies and medical bureaucracies. Each story was a variation on Maria and Diego's experience, loving parents watching their children face devastating diseases, while financial and systemic barriers prevented access to life-saving treatments. One letter came from Jennifer Martinez in Phoenix, whose 5-year-old daughter had been diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. "We watched your interview with Diego, and my daughter asked me why some kids get to have medicine to make them feel better and others don't. I said, look, if medicine can make you feel better, it should make you accept that. Do whatever it takes." I didn't know how to answer her. We've been fighting our insurance company for 8 months to approve her treatment. We've sold our house, borrowed money from everyone we know, and we're still $200,000 short. I'm not asking you for money. I know you can't help everyone. I'm just asking you to remember that there are thousands of families like ours who are watching their children suffer while the system fails them. The weight of these stories was becoming overwhelming, but it also clarified Matt's sense of purpose. This wasn't just about Diego anymore. It was about addressing a crisis that affected thousands of families who were suffering in silence, just as Maria had been. Working with legal experts and healthcare policy advocates, Matt began developing a comprehensive foundation that would operate on multiple levels: direct financial assistance for families facing immediate crises, advocacy for policy changes to improve insurance coverage for rare disease treatments, research funding for new therapies, and perhaps most importantly, a support network to help families navigate the complex medical and financial systems they were facing. The Foundation's mission statement, drafted after weeks of consultation with medical experts and patient advocates, was simple but comprehensive. Every child deserves access to life-saving medical treatment, regardless of their family's financial circumstances or social status. The Diego Foundation exists to bridge the gap between available treatments and the families who need them, while working to create systemic changes that will eliminate these barriers for future generations. 6 months after the 60 Minutes interview aired, Matt stood in the pediatric wing of Children's Hospital Los Angeles, watching Diego play with other children in the therapy room. The transformation was remarkable, not just in Diego's physical condition, but in his confidence and energy. The experimental gene therapy had exceeded everyone's expectations, and Diego was not only maintaining his muscle function but actually showing improvements in strength and mobility. The results have been extraordinary, Dr. Chen explained during their quarterly review meeting. Diego's response to the treatment is among the best we've seen in our clinical trials. His muscle enzyme levels have improved significantly, and his physical therapy assessments show strength gains that we rarely see in DMD patients. But the real measure of success wasn't in medical charts or test results. It was in watching Diego run around the playground, seeing him laugh with friends, hearing him talk excitedly about his science projects at school. The boy who had been facing a progressive, devastating disease was now planning for a future that included college, career, and all the possibilities that most children take for granted. The Diego Foundation had grown beyond Matt's wildest expectations. What had started as one family's crisis had evolved into a comprehensive organization that had helped over 300 families access treatments for rare diseases. The foundation had partnered with major medical centers, pharmaceutical companies, and insurance providers to create new pathways for treatment approval and funding. More importantly, the foundation had begun addressing systemic issues. Working with patient advocacy groups and healthcare policy experts, they had successfully lobbied for changes in insurance regulations that expanded coverage for experimental treatments. They had established research partnerships that were accelerating the development of new therapies for rare diseases. And they had created support networks that were helping families navigate the complex medical and financial challenges that came with rare disease diagnoses. One of the most meaningful developments was the peer support program, where families who had successfully navigated treatment journeys were paired with newly diagnosed families. Maria had become one of the program's most effective advocates, using her experience to help other parents understand their options and maintain hope during the darkest moments of their children's illnesses. When I was sitting on your living room floor, crying because I thought I was going to lose Diego, I felt completely alone, Maria told Matt during one of their regular foundation meetings. I thought no one could understand what we were going through. Now I talk to parents every week who are in that same place, and I can tell them that there is hope, that there are people who will help, that their children can have futures. The foundation's impact was being measured not just in dollars raised or families helped, but in policy changes achieved and systemic barriers removed. Insurance companies were beginning to approve experimental treatments that had previously been rejected. Medical centers were establishing new programs specifically for rare disease patients. Pharmaceutical companies were partnering with patient advocacy groups to make treatments more accessible. But perhaps the most significant impact was cultural. The conversation around rare diseases had shifted from individual tragedies to collective responsibility. Other celebrities were following Matt's example, using their platforms to highlight health crises and support medical research. Corporate leaders were establishing similar foundations. The concept of using privilege and resources to address healthcare inequities was becoming mainstream. You've created something that's going to outlast all of us, Dr. Williams told Matt during a foundation board meeting. The families we're helping today will have children and grandchildren who benefit from the systems you've put in place. The research we're funding will lead to treatments that haven't even been conceived yet. The policy changes we've achieved will affect thousands of families who don't even know they need help yet. 2 years had passed since that life-changing evening when Matt found Maria crying on his living room floor. The Diego Foundation now occupied a beautiful facility in West Hollywood, with 42 dedicated professionals who had helped over 800 families access life-saving treatments for rare diseases. Diego, now 11 and stronger than anyone had dared hope, stood addressing newly diagnosed families during the Foundation's monthly support meeting. His voice carried confidence mixed with deep empathy. "I know you're scared," Diego told the gathered parents and children. "When I first got sick, I was scared too. My mom was scared. We didn't know if I would walk or play soccer again, but we learned that being scared is okay, and that there are people who care about kids like us." Maria sat in the back, tears of pride streaming as she watched her son inspire others. She had become the foundation's director of family services, transformed from someone who felt undeserving of help into a fierce advocate for other families. Dr. Jennifer Morrison from Johns Hopkins approached Matt with exciting news about their research. The preliminary results are extraordinary. We're seeing consistent improvements when treatment begins within 6 months of diagnosis. Diego's case became our proof of concept that aggressive early intervention can actually reverse damage. Patricia Stevens, a documentary filmmaker, was capturing final interviews for The Ripple Effect: How One Act of Kindness Changed Everything. She asked Matt the central question, "Did you imagine helping one child would lead to all this?" Matt looked around the bustling office, at families finding hope in dark moments, at Diego playing with younger children beginning their treatment journeys. "I hoped it would lead to something bigger, but couldn't have imagined this scope," he replied. Individual acts of compassion create ripple effects extending far beyond what you see. When we helped Diego, we helped every child who would benefit from research his treatment made possible. Every family finding support, every policy change making treatments accessible. As evening settled, Matt found himself with Diego and Maria in his office, their monthly tradition of quiet reflection. "Mr. Damon," Diego said, "I wrote an essay about people who changed my life. I wrote about you, but also Mom, Dr. Chen, everyone at the foundation. I realized you didn't just save my life. You showed me that one person helping another can change the whole world." Matt felt familiar tightness in his throat. "You know what, Diego? You and your mom saved my life too. You showed me what it means to use influence and resources for something that matters. Everything I thought important before seems small compared to watching you play soccer or helping families find hope." Maria squeezed Matt's hand. "I think we all saved each other, and now we spend our lives saving others." As they prepared to leave, Diego asked, "Do you think we've helped enough people, or is there more work?" Matt smiled, recognizing the drive that had transformed one crisis into a movement. "Diego, the work is just beginning, and I think you're going to be leading it. The ripple effect, starting with compassion on a Beverly Hills floor, was now touching lives worldwide. As Diego wisely understood, the work was just beginning.